Welcome back to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. This week, I'm your host, Nick Weisenberger, coming to you live from Dublin, Ohio. And if you're a listener of the show, you may have noticed that we've gone on a little bit of an unexpected break here in April 2022. It's been a kind of crazy and hectic month, but we are back, and we have a very special guest. Even if you don't know his name, you probably know some of the projects that he's worked on. It is the man behind Print My Ride Detroit, Matt Schmotzer. How's it going, Matt?
Pretty good. Thanks for the intro. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks for being here. And so if the people that have been Coaster101 fans have been reading articles on our website, they should know you because we did an interview actually all the way back in 2017, actually.
Yeah, it's 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's crazy to like time flies. So I guess quickly first, for the people that haven't written that article, which you should stop the podcast and go read it now, but could you just kind of just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you said, my name is Matt Schmotzer, and I am Print My Ride Detroit. And my whole, shtick is to do working model roller coasters, and specifically ones that are 3D printed, and now more so just working models in general. I met up with you guys back in 2017 because I did a working 3D printed model of Invertigo, which is a roller coaster at Kings Island, and I think it was like a 1/20th scale. I can't remember the scale off the top of my head, but it was a working model, and you were nice enough to reach out and ask me how I, worked on that and what I did. And really at the time, this was 5 years ago, by the way, I was just doing this as a project to get noticed in the coaster, realm, as, trying to get my foot in the door to eventually work on actual real roller coaster projects and kind of just find my way to get into the industry. So it's funny because, back then I had no idea what I was doing and just trying to do something cool. And now I feel like I use that as a stepping stone to find my way to venture into new projects, cooler projects, and actually projects that I would like to think are in the industry and got me to where I am. And I turned a hobby or a passion project into now a successful side business. So I really think it's almost like an underdog story. And I love talking about it because I did it and I found my way doesn't mean anyone else couldn't and find their own way. And I think the point is do cool projects, people will notice, and then they will give you opportunities.
That's awesome. That's an awesome story. And yeah, your Invertigo project was a thing that really caught our eye because before that, I think I'd seen maybe like someone do 3D printing for like a single piece of track or maybe like a car, but yours was the first like fully operational, realistic looking, like operating model roller coaster.
Yeah, and at the time I was following like Mike Graham and Phil Kaiser, and they had and Chris Gray. They did model roller coasters. Specifically, like Mike Graham had a working one, Phil had working ones, and I know you have some other articles on them on your website. And I was thinking, okay, they did cool things that got them noticed. How do I put my own mark? Because what you want to do is either find a way to do something better than someone else, or find your own unique way to do it. And what I was thinking, I could 3D print these. And as I was printing the track pieces, I was like, why don't I just build the full circuit? Why don't I, do the full layout? And I tried to pick something that I thought was easy and turned out to be a whole nother can of worms. But it just proved that, I'm willing to be dedicated to the project and stick it the whole way through. And I think that was the important part, just to find a project, dedicate your time to it, make sure it's successful. And I was, super ecstatic that you guys took notice and you were able to kind of like watch me as it progressed. So that was very exciting.
Yeah, I think that's cool how you share everything on social media so you can see how the project progresses and everything. And really, it's like I'm just kind of living vicariously through you in a way because, like, as a child, my dream was to always like build my own working model roller coaster. But at that time, there was like nothing out there. Like the internet was still just kind of beginning. I mean, there weren't really even any good, Connect model coasters yet. It was just like the original one that didn't have upside wheels. It was pretty terrible. The CoasterDynamix didn't exist yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I was what 14 when CoasterDynamix released the Scorpion, and I was like, I want that thing, but I didn't have the money for it, and I was a kid and I didn't know any better. So I was right there with you. I was like, I want to be involved. I want to do the models. I want to do something coaster related. And it's funny because I think there's like generations of people that go through. It's like, how do I make my mark? And this is like my way. And I think you're in the same boat. It's like, I see like these cool projects. How do I make my mark? And I know at least for your case, you have this awesome website that everyone goes to as a resource, and it's amazing. And I just wanted to find my little niche to contribute. So I feel that I like to give back, and I like to. Or you made a great point. There's not a lot of resources out there. Everything's very secret. Everything's very proprietary. There's a lot of intellectual, proprietary, property, and they don't like to share it. And I like to be like the guy that's like, oh, coaster companies hate Matt because he'll just show you how to do it or show you what they're doing. And I started dabbling in it, but it takes time and there's no payoff for me. There's no reward financially. So I just do it out of the graciousness. And that's why it's slow. Whereas I like to venture into other things that are, worth the time. But eventually I'd like to show off more because as there's more people that understand and can get that leap ahead, then there's more competition, more innovation, and it's better for the coaster community. So that's why I like to share it without infringing on anyone's IP. So
That's exactly what I was going to say too. It's like the one of the things that we love about your channels is that you don't just sit on this information. You don't just kind of like hoard the information to yourself. Is you share the information and give back to the community.
that's what I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to do that more. And it is slow. And the other tough thing, it's I gotta find a way to keep it entertaining. Like I'm sure if it's not entertaining, people won't stay around. So I'm gonna try to find more ways to do that, but that's a long term goal. Not I haven't done it yet. Right now, I've just kind of been like, hey, if you have no limits data, this is how you get it into a CAD software. Then it's up to you. But that's already a leap where people are already getting nervous, saying, I don't know what's going on here, so I might have to dumb it down a bit. But I'm trying.
Very cool. So I guess maybe let's get into some specific projects. So like your first big one was the Invertigo coaster, right?
Absolutely, yes. Which I know you have an article, and we don't have to talk too much about that. But yeah, it's a working model of Invertigo. It's an inverted shuttle boomerang, and it fully functioned as the real ride. There was a lot of challenges that went into that. I will let the listeners go check out your video. I don't want to dwell too much on it if you don't want to, but that was really what made the foundation of where I am today and what grew into other projects.
So there's a lot of things you learn on that project that could withstand.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And I will put in the show notes the link to that article and the some of the videos as well. So after that project, what was the next major one you worked on after that?
And this is probably where we kind of venture away from everything that we've been in touch, but from that I wanted to get a picture of the model next to the real ride. And at the time, and like this is like 5 years ago, I don't know if there was like a PR person at Kings Island or not. I couldn't find anyone, and the only person I really knew of at Cedar Fair that was really outgoing was Tony Clark. So I reached out and I said, hey, I got this cool model, I just want to get a picture of it next to Invertigo at Kings Island. Do you like have any contacts? And he goes, hey, cool, this is great. We'll hook you up. But would you like to make a model for our new ride? And remember, this is 2017. And what opened in 2018? Well, that was Steel Vengeance. And so he says, do you want to make a working model of this new ride? And I go, yeah. Who would say no? Only an idiot. So I actually, as an idiot, said yes. I would love to do it, not understanding the amount of work and time that would go into a project like that.
The scale of the ride itself is so much bigger than Vertigo.
Absolutely. And that was the other thing too, is we had a whole debate on the size of the model. And then once we settled on the size, I was like, dude, this is still ginormous. I was actually voting to make it bigger than what it was. And Tony at Cedar Point was saying, hey, we need to make this smaller. It needs to fit in a room. And I was like, but the physics, like from my experience with Invertigo, I was like, I need to make it a certain scale. Otherwise, I don't know what I'm doing. And there was a back and forth, and we compromised on a scale, which I wasn't really comfortable with, being it was a smaller scale. But I think, you would know as seen it in person, it's still huge. And it's a much smaller scale. And there was a lot of other challenges that came with it, but I agreed and it was great. Like I got
Wasn't one of the limiting factors being able to fit it through the doorway?
Yeah, so that was another whole thing because it was going to sit at the museum in Frontier Town at Cedar Point. I was thinking like, oh, there's a garage door, like a retractable door. I was like, yeah, we'll just throw it through the back. Well, when I was talking to them about transporting it, they said, oh, by the way, there's a wall on the other side of that door, so you can't just like move the model in through the loading dock. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So after some back and forth, we found out we had to move the model through the front door of the museum, which is no joke, 2 double doors. And I was like, I didn't design the tables to come apart that way. We had to take the lift hill off. I thought we were going to move that model into the museum in about 2 hours, and it almost took a full day. Just like taking parts apart, moving it in, and that was a challenge. The fact that we wanted to get it all done and complete before the ride even opened was a challenge. There were so many things that I had never dealt with. Just with Invertigo, I knew stuff would take longer than usual. But the cool thing about the Steel Vengance project is I actually felt like a coaster manufacturer. I had to make sure this thing actually worked by the time I got there. And the cool thing is everything went wrong. So I learned really fast, like, okay, your model is not working. How do you entertain the park to make them happy? What do you like? We found very creative ways to make sure both parties were satisfied with what they were getting. Because think about this. If I was Cedar Point, I said I wanted a model Steel Vengeance, and then your manufacturer said, "Hey, it's not going to work by this date," and you're like, "Well, people are expecting, or like, what are you going to do?" So we thought of creative things. Like I was like, "Oh, well, I'll come on the weekends, and people can watch me build it and ask me questions." So I became a living exhibit, and that was the solution to it not being done, which I actually think was even better than just throwing a model there because people were very curious about what I was doing. I had no problem interacting with people and answering questions. And I think it was actually more fun. And I know we kind of chatted about, just like to make the physics work, I had to make like the trains just weigh a ton. And we were talking about that. And it's funny because you talk about real coaster design and they don't even think about the weight. And really it boils down to the friction, which in my case, I need to maintain the momentum to eliminate that friction factor. So I had to learn on the fly a lot of things, and it was a whole nother experience of how not necessarily the engineering behind a project like this, but just like the project management and interaction with the park. I learned a lot there, and that is priceless to me because then I really understood what they were looking for, and how to make sure they're happy with what they're getting. So that was invaluable to me, and I really enjoyed that project. And right now, the model actually had to get moved around because they wanted to renovate the museum. It's actually in the arcade, and it's a static model right now. We couldn't get it to run reliably, but in my mind, even with all of the hurdles, I think the project was a success for me because the park got a very cool model. It looks cool. It doesn't work, which it is, what it is, but they got something that people were talking about. I got the recognition, at least in the coaster community, to at least get people interested. RMC was interested. CoasterDynamix was interested. A lot of other people were interested. And I got to meet and interact with a lot of different people. And actually, from the Steel Vengance project, that's actually how I got hooked up with CoasterDynamix. And they said, "What did you design it with?" Like, the model. And I said, "Oh, SolidWorks." And we do work in SolidWorks. And they asked me to do some freelance work for them remotely. And I absolutely said yes. And that's kind of how I got my foot in the door there. And that's how that partnership came out. So all I'm saying is, even though the project had a lot of issues and it didn't go as planned, the actual end result was a net positive for myself, Cedar Point, and also other people within the industry. So I would just say, to kind of, put this all together, is Cedar Point took a risk in me. And I think the industry as a whole, and Cedar Point and CoasterDynamix and myself and every party involved, there's a net positive out of it, even with all the issues we had, so to speak. So very positive experience, and I really enjoyed it. And I actually thank the Cedar Point for just taking putting their neck on the line, just trusting a kid that was like, I want to do this. So that was great for them, and I thank them.
The Invertigo model, you didn't have any of the actual dimensions. You were just like looking at pictures.
Invertigo, I was just Googling it.
But then Steel Vengeance, did you have the actual plans to work with?
Yeah, and that actually, it might be an excuse, but when we were talking, or when I was talking to Cedar Point, it was back in October when we originally decided to do this, but I didn't get anything to work off of until January. So like there was 3 months of just waiting. Which that would have been 3 months I could have been working. I wouldn't have been stressed out as much. And but the problem there is like, you have a big corporation, they got to go like, the left hand talking to the right hand. It's like I'm working with the marketing guys, they got to go to the engineering group, they got to get well, is he, did he sign an NDA, is he going to disclose, like, there's all the legal stuff. So by the time we got through all that, I finally got what, and I'm a, I guess, perfectionist in like the sense that I want it to look like the real thing. I'm not just going to like throw together some pieces that look like it. Like I want it to be legit. People were asking me how big is, or how tall is the second hill. I took a ruler and said, divide this by, I think it was like 37. Is this going 137 or is it 127? I don't remember the scales. I just don't remember. But I was like, you divide it by that. That is the height, because all I did is I took the original planche, hit divide by whatever the scale was. I think it was 37. Let's just use that. Hit divide by 37 and bam, I just designed right to it. So everything was to scale. And that's what I take pride in. And I had a lot of people criticizing me saying it's going to be really hard to make a working model that's like to scale. You're going to have to fudge some things. And I didn't want to do that. And I think to this day that I could have gotten that model to work if I had more time. But the fact that I had to wait for them to go through all the legal and get all the documents in order, and that coupled with they just found me at the end of 2017, I think at the time it worked out better. It would have worked out better, and it'd probably be running right now. But I'm not going to complain. It still worked out, and I think it was great. But yeah, I got to work with the. That was a long story to say. Yeah, I got to work with the actual drawings and everything. It was great. Came straight from I think RMC or Ride Centerline, one of those two.
So when you say it doesn't work, does that just mean like it just runs out of energy like halfway through the course somewhere? Or?
It'll valley. So, and it all depends too, because it depends on the day, the train. Like it, like the issue really boiled down to is I had a deadline. Actually, I had many deadlines, and I was trying to meet these deadlines, and I didn't focus. And this is just me learning. It's like I should just focus on making it work, not meeting this new deadline that just showed up. It was always like, hey, we want to make sure it works by this date, and it's like I can't promise that. And I was like, I'm going to try, and I would try, which would result in me cutting corners, hastily putting stuff together, just being really inefficient. When really I should just took a step back and was like, we're going to make this right the first time. And I did so many things just to try to be like, oh, well, we'll just wing it, which I shouldn't have done, which I've learned. And I think that the human error is what bogged down the success of it. But yeah, it would valley. Like there's sometimes like it would actually make it around, and I didn't get any video of it, of course. But the sometimes that I would give video. The problem is anytime I would do any inversion, there'd be the friction on the wheels coupled with the way the train was configured. There was always issues. And the fact that I actually retracked it twice. So I can officially say I have RMC and an RMC, which is really funny. So it originally had laser cut acrylic track, and then we did laser cut aluminum, which runs so well. And I'm going to revisit that eventually, because that's the way to go if you want to make a working model. But again, as I said, hastily put it together. And the problem is when I did it the second time is I'm driving to the park on weekends. I have a day job, like professionally I work in automotive, and it'd be like you work all week and then you drive 3 hours to a park, try some things that may or may not work, drive 3 hours back. And like by the time you have to drive back and forth, taking your tool, like you just get exhausted. The human aspect comes in where you're just like, dude, I just need to get out of this. And is it really worth it? You get all those questions. So after 2 years of that, and actually the first year when I was working at the park, like I was doing every weekend for the whole summer. So I was officially on site at Cedar Point every weekend in the summer, trying to make this thing work. And I was very dedicated because I wanted to make it work. And it's just one of those, you can only do so much as one person. So,
So you think it's going to remain a static model more than
yep.
likely?
Yeah, so I've been close with the park, and they've been really cool with me. That kind of goes into the next story. Is I reached out to them. I said, "This is like it's a passion project, and I don't want to see it just sitting there. I want to make it work." So for the first year, I think that was 2019. So the model was debuted in 2018 when the ride opened. I worked on it for a year. And then the second year I said, I talked to the park. I was like, it was like 2019, 2020, sometime in there. Maybe it's between the seasons. I was like, I want to come back and work on this. Well, at the same time, I was dabbling in these coaster cutouts, and Cedar Point of all parks was really interested in them. So I got into like almost a resource contest where it was like, do I go work on this model, or do I work on these cutouts that the merchandise department wanted? And so it was a funny conversation where I was like, I can't dedicate any more time to this model. We're actually going to, make your park money, whereas this model is not making the park money. It is actually taking up space, and no one wants to really look at something that doesn't work. So let's dedicate my time to something that actually will be profitable for both the park and me. And so that's where the cutouts came in, and Cedar Point, which I like to think, and they might have another opinion, but because we were so closely, working together, like I was working with their merchandise department and CoasterDynamix, and then we were developing coaster cutouts, and they jumped on it with the Steel Vengeance and Millennium Force ones. They were the first to adopt it and really took a risk there, and it turned out very successful. And now almost every park in North America has them. Not all of them, but it's crazy. And they took a risk there. So I think, that was way more important than the model. And that's kind of where that fizzled out. So there was agreement that, we'll keep it static, dedicate your energy here. And they got a lot of cool things that I actually try to go above and beyond to make sure they get some cool things more so than other parks, just because they invested in me. So I will give that back to them. Yeah.
Was that the first project you worked for CoasterDynamix? Was the coaster cutouts?
So no, actually it wasn't.
So you did Steel Vengance, and that led into working with CoasterDynamix.
Yes. So if we take a step back from cutouts, when I was working on the model before I tried to get it done the first time, so this is, let's say, still 2018-ish, a lot of people took notice, and that's when CoasterDynamix reached out to me and they said, what are you designing this model in? And they were actually in conversation with me on Reddit because I posted a couple pictures, and they said, this isn't going to work, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nah, screw you. I'm going to make it work. You watch. I guess they win in the end. But they said, what are you designing in? I was like, I'm using SolidWorks to design these. And they said, okay, cool. Well, we design nanos in SolidWorks. And actually, you can find an interview with Jack Reimer. He's the owner of CoasterDynamix. And he did an interview, I think it was with Ace, talking, and he goes into detail about, how he met me. And it's the same story. They reached out and said, hey, you're doing all this cool modeling. Can you, we have to do like 20 nanos for the 2019 season. Can you help us out? Because they're just swamped. Like they have to do all sorts of stuff. They have so many projects going on. They have like CoasterDynamix, CDX, nanocoasters, all sorts of stuff. And I was like, yeah, sure. Just let me know. Like I love roller coasters and I'm really an enthusiast like everyone else. Like tell me what you need. So they gave me a list and they're like, all right, if you can do these in like the next 6 months before May, I think it was like November, he hooked me up. He's like, if you can do these next, 20 models in the next 6 months, just that'd be great. I did them all in like 3 weeks because I was like, yeah, like I just love this shit. Like I was all about it. I was so excited. Let's put it that way. I'm still excited.
Did they have any like instructions or procedures like how to do it, or did you kind of figure out?
Yeah. Okay. Way? So So let me. So I did skip that. So Jack had his engineer Dan Linden. He met up with me. We got on Skype, and he showed me the process. He's like, "This is how we do it. This is our guidelines." They told me what I needed to do to satisfy, the criteria that CoasterDynamix, had solidified over their years of developing the product. So yeah, they showed me exactly how to do it. And now let me jump back to where I was. I was like, yeah, I'm like so excited and geeked out that I just knocked them all out. And they're like, wow, you did these really fast and they look, pretty good. So they actually asked me to continue doing them whenever they were overloaded with work. And I think I don't I don't keep track, and I don't know if they do, but I think we're at 150 nanos, and I think I've done 82 of them. At least the last time I checked, it was like 82. I know I've done 82 of them, but I've done a lot of them, and I think I've done almost half. Is that half? No, that's probably more than half. But
You have like a favorite nano coaster that you've made, or most challenging
um,
one?
they love to give me the hard ones just because they know I'll do it. Because I'm a coaster nut. Um, I have a tie for my favorites. The cool thing is you can buy them both off the CoasterDynamix website directly. So my two favorites are Dueling Dragons and Olympia Looping. They're sitting on my desk, but yeah, Dueling Dragons and the Olympia Looping, because they're just two iconic coasters. You got the B&M Dueling, and you got the classic Schwarzkopf European ride. Those were also both very well, not very, but they were difficult because they're weaving inside of each other, and they had a lot going on. Those are my favorites as far as like layouts and just ones to do. I have a lot of favorite ones as far as stories go, as far as like your podcast people will love this, and here's some insider knowledge. So we try to match the layouts as much as possible, and I just did a goof, and I'll let you guys know it, so don't get too mad. El Toro is a great ride. El Toro has an awesome nano, but some of the people that are more enthusiastic than me in coasters have noticed that the drop is not the correct angle, which I am so bitter about, because I was like, we got it really close, but if you take a protractor and measure that measure that first drop, it is not what Roller Coaster Database says. So
Yeah, and those coaster nerds will notice, and we will call you out.
oh, I know. I'm a coaster nerd too, and I was like, like it's funny because here's the problem: when the park asks for a nano, they don't give you anything. You think we get all the drop? No, they do not give you any of them. They try to keep as much in house as possible, so we can only go off of what we go. And here's the thing: it's like I've never ridden the ride. Yeah, I know, right? I wish I did, but I actually the references that we were allowed to use for that, I missed the mark. I think it's like a couple degrees. It's not even a lot. It's minimal. So that's a fun story. So I like that one because that's my El Toro nano story. So
Easter egg. It's an Easter egg.
if yeah, it is an Easter egg, and if you get upset, come blame me. Don't blame CoasterDynamix. They're great. That was on me. So
Yeah, there's a lot of actually people. You got to get your facts right when you're
oh, I
writing
know.
articles about coasters. But I know questions you probably get a lot is like, do you pick which coasters to do, or like do the parks come to you, or can you go to the park and say like I want to do this one? Like how do you choose?
Great question. So when I was doing the nanos, I had the same questions for CoasterDynamix as you just did, and I didn't know that until I essentially developed the Coaster Cutout product line. Essentially, long story short, the park is the customer. They want, and the customer's always right. They always get what they want. The customer is what delegates what they get. So we can influence that. We can suggest what they might want. But at the end of the day, they're the ones that place the order.
You can pick what they think is going to sell, right?
Exactly. The long story short is they tell us what to do. And there's a lot. Oh my gosh. There's so many nanos we would love to do, but if the park doesn't want it, we don't do it.
Okay, so from nano coasters, then how did that transition into doing the coaster cutouts?
Yeah, so I did maybe, I don't know, like 20 or 30 nanos. Once you get your foot in the door and make, a couple nanos, you start like thinking like, oh, well, we like make like a park where all the nanos go there? But the problem is like they don't scale correctly between nanos. Like I was trying to think of like all different ways to make cool merch for roller coasters because I'm a geek and I'm just like thinking, and they haven't thought of all of these already. Like there's like, oh man, Matt's going down the rabbit hole. But I went back to just 3D printing models, not really working ones, but I did an inverted B&M invert car. that was really large. And the point of that project was just to get as much detail as possible. And the thing was huge. It was like 10 inches wide, 8 inches tall, and like 3 inches deep. Like it was huge.
That was just a personal project, like for fun.
Yeah, it was
Like
just for
you're
fun, just to,
learning.
you know, pass time really. Nothing specific. There was no reason. And I wanted to make it like just obnoxiously big. And I did that one. And then I did another B&M Hyper, which this was after Steel Vengance. This is after I'm already working with CoasterDynamix. And I did one over Orion. So that was when did that ride come out? 2019, 2020 timeframe. So I did that. And a lot of people were like, and I'm posting this on my Instagram and they're like, oh, can I buy that off you? And I was like, it's not for sale because, like it's just not for sale. And they're like, oh, well, would you take like $200 for it? And I was like, dude, like, it's like 300 in just materials, like alone, like with like the fasteners, the resin, because I like do it all in resin 3D prints, like not FDM for those. I did a little bit of both. But I was like, this isn't a profitable venture. I'm doing this for fun, just to learn, just to do it. And I kept getting like, not harassed, but just poked, like, hey, we want to buy it. Like people were interested. And I was lucky enough to be invited to SolidWorks World in 2019, and there they asked me to bring the Raptor model, which is the inverted B&M train, which I had in their hive. And then also at the same time, Formlabs, the 3D printing company, asked me to debut my Orion train in their booth because it was all printed on their SLA technology 3D printer. And I was like, this is awesome. So I went there, and the event was great. It's a CAD conference, like computer aided design, a lot of nerds that are, tech savvy, but not coaster savvy. Like they're not coaster people. And you know how many people came up and said, oh, that's cool, I'd totally buy that. And I was like, have you ridden this ride? Do you know anything about coasters? And like, no, that's cool. But like, I think it's like a model car. Like, you build car kits, like you build train kits. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. However, what you're looking at probably cost me like $500 in raw materials, and then that's not even including my time. Like I couldn't imagine putting a price tag on this thing. And would you even want it at that expense? Like I'm realistic. It's like it's not worth it. Like you don't want to buy this off me. Like I unless you're really into it. And so one of the people there said, like, well, if you found a way to reduce the cost on these, like I think it would sell well. And at the same time, there's a guy in the next booth over that had a mobile makerspace. So it was no joke a makerspace in a trailer. So he had like 3D printers, laser cutters, CNC machines, vacuum formers, like anything you'd find at a makerspace. And he goes, well, why don't you just like laser cut them? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. No joke. Went back up to the hotel room at the conference, booted up my laptop, and then redid the entire Orion train out of wood, like as it laser cutted. And that is the birth of Coaster Cutouts. It was a bunch of people saying,
during the conference.
yep, find a way to reduce the cost to make coaster models. And really, that just kind of goes back to, what invention is. It's you're solving a problem. Even though this is a novel one, like the problem is people want a coaster model, but they don't want to pay a lot of money for it, but they want to have the experience of putting it together. So that's where this came. It's like we can laser cut the wood. It'll be cheap enough that we can, make these that it would be a price that people could afford, and we can mass produce these quickly, where 3D printing is not a fast way to it's not mass production. It's just not how you do it. You want to do injection molding, but then you got to pay for the tool investment. That's just not where this is. So laser cutting was the best solution. That's kind of that is how Coaster Cutouts came to be. And when I developed this, I actually took it to the CoasterDynamix guys. I said, dude, I got this sweet idea. You got to check this out. This is a complement to nanos. You have your nano coaster for the layout. You have the coaster cutout for the ride vehicle. And then they said, well, we're not sure if, that's going to sell. Let us know. Like, we'll think about it. And I did an Etsy, run, and I sold generic ones, and it did very well. And there's a select few people that have those original models, which I think those are really cool. And you had to glue it together. Well, CoasterDynamix, they said, if you can eliminate the glue and make it snap together, we're on board. So I spent maybe 3 or 4 months trying out tab designs and working with their engineer Dan, trying to figure out how to do it. And once we did, it was great. Like then they're like, all right, let's do it. Let's find a park. Let's see who will bite. And guess who I have a relationship with? Cedar Point. So I went back, did a Millennium. I love it. Like Millennium Force was the first one I did, and I was like, here it is. We have Millennium Force, and they're like, yeah, we'll take it. What do you got next? And I was like, well, there's this ride that like I have this weird relationship with. It's called Steel Vengeance, and I love and hate it. So I did a Steel Vengeance one, and Cedar Point got the first 2 cutouts. It was a Millennium Force cutout, and it was a Steel Vengeance one. And we're all thinking, we're all coaster people, and they're very smart people too. They were saying, well, can we get the full train? So not only did they get the lead cars, but they got the full train as a limited edition. We designed all of that, and boom, that is how you get coaster cutouts. And that's the birth story. That's how it kind of came out.
Awesome. And now, how many products for cutouts have you designed up to this point?
What a great question. I lost count. We're in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Like there's so many. And the beauty of it is like, and you know, people are smart. Like if you have like a B&M Hyper, you have like, you know, all the generic, you have like, it's like you just need to really redesign the hood, not necessarily the seats. So like an Orion would look like a Raging Bull, which would look like an Apollo's Chariot, which would look like you know, blah 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 blah, any other hypers. And that's okay because a lot of people would say, well, you're cheating, you know, you're kind of, you know, reusing a lot. And I'd say no, because people will really only buy their favorite ride. And there's going to be a sentimental like attachment between I love Diamondback, so I have to get a Diamondback one, even though it kind of looks like the similars to, you know, Orion or Candemonium, or like, I guess it has different seating, but you get my point. If you have an emotional attachment to a ride, you're going to want to get it. So I didn't see a problem with that. And it makes the production easier because then we don't have to do instructions. We don't have to redo the design of the model. Like there's a lot of benefits from a production standpoint there. But yeah, it just blew up from there, and we just been going with it. And I want to get every roller coaster a cutout because every coaster deserves its own merch.
You designed the vehicle in 3D, but when you buy them, they come in flat sheets, right? So somehow you have to take all the parts and figure out like the minimum number of sheets you can fit them on.
Yes. So and that is, you know, a lot of people don't think about that, but when we developed this product, and I'm glad you brought that up. Like CoasterDynamix is very smart. Like Jack and Dan, they know how to run a business, and they know what it's going to take to make a product, you know, viable in this market. So they said, you know, or they gave me the challenge to be like, all right, we need to make sure that when we do all these, they need to fit in the same box. They need to fit in the same box that has the same dimensions. They need to have the same number, you know, of sheets that go in that box, which we determined before. Some models will have more, some will have less, depending on the complexity. When you do a build, and let's say it's like a PTC train for like the Beast, and then you do a complex build for Gatekeeper, Thunderbird, or X2, like these big ones, they need to fit in the same box. But I haven't designed those rides yet. So we had to be very proactive in, you know, gauging that, and then also fitting these parts on these sheets and making sure the scales are correct. And also what really comes down to it too is making sure that the customer gets the most for their money, because when we sell it to a park, then they'll upcharge it because they got to make money. They got to make money out of the branding. So there's a lot that goes into that too. So we had to be very proactive on how we expand the product line, which not a lot of people would actually take into consideration. And as far as laying the parts out, there's software that's available that will do that for you. After playing around with those different softwares that will nest the parts, it actually was better for me to manually nest them, because I will put like the wheels together, put the chassis together on sheets, and just trying to make it a little more uniform. Because what those nesting programs will do is they'll just throw it in there in any
So then you have to kind of search for where the part is.
Yeah, and you basically set. I want to make sure the parts are like 0.5 inches away, or like 2 millimeters away from the next one. And it just looks messy. It looks like someone just like dumped parts, and it didn't look organized. So we said, yeah, I don't know if it visually looks appealing. Like that sounds weird, but when you look at it, you're like, yeah, this looks like a mess, and it doesn't look professional. So I actually go and personally manually drop every part in to make it look professional, with the asterisk of, if it's really tight, then we use the software. Like there's two models that I can think of that we try to throw in so much detail, and there's so many parts that we just had to do it. It does look like a mess, but you get the bang for your buck. You get a cool model at the end of it.
Yeah, that kind of leads into my next question: is what's the key to making such realistic looking models?
Google. Next question. No, seriously, Google. Like and there's no trick, or there's no.
You don't bring a tape measure to the parks with you, and
No, I wish. I have a story, and I've had some people like. There's been parks that we've approached and said, we have a cutout for your ride. And then they freak out. They're like, how do you have designs? How do you have the drawings? How do you know what our ride even looks like? And these are rides that aren't even open yet. And we're like, well, you released one image. And they're like, you did this off of one image? And I'm like, yeah, but the ride vehicle is like an Intamin, and they all go together the same way. Like all you did is change the hood. I mean, you can kind of figure out what ride I'm going for. But we did one Intamin, and then another one came out, and we're like, yeah, here's this one. They're like, how did you do it? It's like, we just Googled it. I just Googled it, and I love what I do. And I want to make sure it looks good. Like, I'm not going to make a half-ass thing. So it's real. That's the trick. If you Google it and Google enough in the web, you will find enough pictures that you can piece it together. There's no secret. Like I went to their R&D department. They gave me the tip top secret drawings from the manufacturer. No. It's just Google and making it look like, which if you look at them, I'm sure I didn't get them all right, but they're very close.
So when you go to the parks, how cool is it seeing something that you designed for sale inside the park?
Oh, it's surreal. I actually just got back from Florida, where I went to Universal Islands of Adventure, where I got to see the Velocicoaster cutout, which that one is just monumental because that is an awesome ride. And then my wife and I also went to Busch Gardens, Tampa, where Iron Gwazi finally has, their ride open, and we had the Iron Gwazi cutout. And like, it's so cool. Like we just got back from it, even though I have my Cedar Point's my home park, and they've just been great to me. But to go to parks and see that, it really motivates me to do more, and just like, I think where I got today is just because I've shown my story, and I'm very open about it. And because I think people like to see the underdog, or just to see people do great things, that kind of, propels me to do more. And to see, those things, it's awesome. And it's not just a me thing. There's a team behind me. There is parks. There is CoasterDynamix. There's Jack and Dan, all of their employees. There's the park employees. There's people that, and this is cool too, is as I'm designing rides, like I'll reach out to people in the industry and say, hey, I'm working on this cutout. Is there anything I should know about these rides? And, like people that actually worked on them will give me more information in the actual park, because they want the best representation of their ride. And I think that's amazing. And if you watch or listen to a lot of people in the industry, they say, oh, it's a small industry, everyone knows everyone. That is so true. And I think if you have something to bring to the table, they will be open to communicate with you and share ideas and talk about things. So I would just say, if you come with some value, people will then take your value and then, send some back your way. So to answer your question, it's surreal. It's the best. It's so great. It feels weird. It's weird because I wanted to design real roller coasters, and in a weird way, I am designing coasters, but coaster merch. So I am very satisfied, even though it's not actual coasters, but it is still within the industry. And at some like in some way I feel like an imposter, but at the same time, like I actually have, my place in the coaster world.
Yeah, that's what I love about the amusement industry. There's so many different ways to get involved with it.
Absolutely. And you have your own specific outreach, which is awesome too. And I love it.
Yeah, and so then that also like goes into one of the next topics is your other kinds of outreach. So I know there was we both attended a students in themed entertainment at the Ohio State University for the Ohio
Yep.
State Theme Park Engineering Group. So do you want to talk about that and some other different kind of outreach
Yeah,
things that you've
absolutely.
done?
So I and this is like my favorite part because when I was coming out of college, like I wanted to work in the coaster industry and I wanted to do all that, but I didn't really have the network. And at the time, there wasn't like TPEGs or any of these groups. Like I think they were just coming out, but like not
Yeah, yeah,
established.
yeah, same for me. Like when I was, I think like they started after I had just graduated. So like, oh
Exactly. I
man,
know we just missed the
frustrating.
mark, right?
Yeah,
And so it was tough, and it made me sad. My favorite little point is I went to Purdue, and there's a lot of great like you can search like other coaster people that went to Purdue. So I was like, I want to be like them, and they had a roller coaster class at the time, and it was only offered to honor roll or honor students, and you had to have like a 3.8 or some crazy like almost 4 point GPA, and I didn't. I was just an average student, and I was like, so I wanted to get in the class. I went to the professor. I was like, I really want to get in this class. He had no idea what it was. He's like, oh, this is some kid that wants to take a roller coaster class. Like, no, like you don't have the GPA, and I was like, well, hang it up. Can't be a coaster engineer. My GPA isn't there. I do not have a 3.9 or a 4.0 in engineering. So I gave it up. But the point is, you fast forward 10 years, and next thing you know, you're bringing a model of a roller coaster to Purdue, and they're filming it, and you're talking to that same professor who actually had that professor for a dynamics course, which I did okay. I didn't do great, but I did. He knew me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you were in my class." Whenever I was like, "Can I just at least get the notes from that coaster class?" And he was like, "Oh yeah, we actually offer it. It's a tech elective now. Like anyone can take it." And I was
oh,
like, "Are you serious? Like I'm not only missing out on these cool clubs, but also I couldn't take this awesome class that is very good." So I would definitely check that out. I felt so like um not not like alone or not alienated, but I just didn't have those resources. And now like all I want to do is just be like the biggest cheerleader of kids that are going through school that like want to do this stuff, but like don't know what to do. And I just like to go in and say, dude, just do something. Doesn't matter what, but as long as you're passionate about it and you have a project that showcases your capabilities, that's enough to get people to notice it. Because I just did that without anyone telling me, and people noticed, and it kind of propelled me to the next level. So I just want to be that cheerleader because I feel like I didn't have that. And if I did, I wouldn't have I guess waited so long to try out things because it didn't happen right after I graduated. It happened a little bit later. So all I want to do is just just be a motivator, just be a cheerleader. And I like being invited to these events like Ohio State. They have SITE, which is Students in Themed Entertainment, and they invite industry professionals, which I'm so humbled to be there because they have actual engineers that are in the industry. I'm more of a guy in the merchandise department, which I guess it's like the B string. You got the B string guy here. But I want to say, I found my way to get into the industry, and I still get to like deal with roller coasters, manufacturers. Like I can go up to almost, you know, any manufacturer in the U.S. and they at least know, oh yeah, Matt's the cutout guy, which is really cool. So I just want to find a way to give back and showcase what I do and just use that as a boost for them to like this is what I did. Find your own way to make your and carve your own path. So I've done Ohio State site. I go to these seminars for CAD design. I've been part of the REC judging group. That's a Iowa, and they do a ride competition. So I try to be involved. It's tough, with scheduling, but I really want to, just be the biggest cheerleader ever. So yeah, that's kind of like the outreach. thing that I like to do, and just showcase, what I do. Like, I like to feel like one of the guys that just, I don't work for a company. It's not my day job. So I don't mind talking about, like, this is what I think they do to design these things. It's not proprietary to me, and this is just my opinion. So let's talk about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I saw when you went to site, you brought this giant loop of Raptor. Is that the
Yes.
current project that you're working on right now?
There's a story behind that. And I wanted to talk about that too, which, thank you for bringing that up. When I went to site, when they originally invited me in 2019, I was not doing cutouts, but I was doing the models, and I made a giant zero G roll like that, like the zero G roll for Raptor, right? And when I drove it there, it blew up on the highway because I had it all together sitting on the bed of my truck. It just blew up. It's on. So there's actually like model B&M track on the I-75 somewhere
That's awesome.
going down to Columbus, and and the point was, when I got it there, like half the track was gone, and there's pictures of half of a zero G roll, and everyone's like, "That's weird. Like, what's this element?" I'm like, "It's half of a zero G roll. Don't worry about it." So after the pandemic, they invited me to come back, and somebody asked me, like, "Are you gonna bring the Raptor model, because it's really cool? It's actually a full Raptor train, and it's like really large." And I was like, "I don't have a display for it." So and I haven't posted this yet, but I'm going to make a YouTube video showing how I designed it. And it uses MATLAB to take No Limits data and then manipulate the B&M aspect. So basically making the triangular planar shapes to make it, a B&M track. And I'll post it soon. I just haven't had time. But the project was to showcase how to use, automation of your track design, and basically have a computer program do all the design work. So I actually wrote the program in about 2 months, and the actual CAD design of that vertical loop took, no joke, 2 days, because I wrote a script in MATLAB to basically design all of it, and then had another script in SolidWorks VBA to then bring it in and then just do everything. So the design of it took like a day. I think I did it. I brought it in one day. The next day, I'm just setting up to 3D print it, and then I print, and it was very quick. And I'm gonna do a video on it soon. But the point of that project was, I needed to show, or well, I didn't need to, but I wanted to show the kids. I was like, just because I had a failure doesn't mean I'm not done what I didn't learn. And what I did learn is just take the cool thing in parts and then bolt it together when you get there. So the cool thing is everyone that was at site for 2022, they all have a picture next to the giant vertical loop. And everyone's like, "Why'd you do that?" I'm like, "Why not? Who doesn't want a giant 12-foot tall B&M inverted loop in their classroom?"
Those track pieces look massive. Like, how long did it take to make one piece on the 3D printer itself?
So each track piece is about 4 segments that were then epoxied together. To print them, it's about 24 hours a segment. So there's 4 segments, 7 track pieces. Oh, dude, it's late on a Friday night. I don't know how to do math. But you also divide that over 8 different machines, because I basically have a small printer farm. To print the track, and then also to print the support pieces, or the support joints, is about like 4 or 5 days, just of constant printing. And then the actual supports are just PVC pipe, 2-inch, so like 2-inch thick. So it was rather a quick build, and dividing all those pieces over 8 3D printers, it is really quick. And each track piece, I think the track pieces are 3.5 to 4 feet long each. So the entire like track length, it's pretty long. It's just massive. And it's funny because the whole reason we were invited to go to site was to talk about CoasterDynamix. And I was there with Dan, and he's one of the engineers at CoasterDynamix. He's like, "Why'd you do this? Like, no one cares. This is a giant loop. What is the purpose?" And I was like, "That's not the point. The point is to blow people's minds. Also, it's Raptor at Cedar Point. It's got to be bigger, faster, taller, and better. So we have to do it."
One of the things I remember that you said from our earlier interview is you had your 3D printers actually like printing parts for the other 3D printers, or like building 3D printers from 3D printers.
Yes, there. That's the cool thing. Like if you want to do so, that's the cool thing about our relationship is like you see me at the beginning when I was in my apartment. I've since bought a house. I have a workshop. I've grown, and that's really cool to see too because now um, I was able to grow my workspace because I'm more of a tinkerer and I don't just buy new machines. I actually, like you said, I 3D printed parts to build 3D printers. And I like to use Lulzbot because all of their 3D printers are open source. So you can go online and download their CAD files to their parts, 3D print them, and then build more 3D printers. So I actually have 8 Lulzbots. I actually only purchased one of them from them, actually, which they'll probably be mad. The other ones were either bought off Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or actually made from scratch. So you have to be, like you say, oh, I have 8 3D printers. Like, that's a lot of money. It's like, it really wasn't. I actually saved a lot because I learned how they work, how to, flash them, how to build them. And they work very well. A lot of the machinery I have and equipment I have came secondhanded, or it came used and was broken, and I had to figure out how to fix it.
Are there any other projects you're working on at the moment, or are there any future plans you have that maybe some of them you can't talk about, but you can give us a hint or something?
Absolutely. So, like I said, I would love to have a cutout for every coaster, but at the same time, I would like to venture into, what other things we could do with coaster models. Like, um, I have a lot of cool ideas. I would like to, and it all depends. I would like to get into more of like the educational, like this is how roller coasters are made, but I want to keep it entertaining. And I was thinking of like different ways to actually make, like roller coaster track pieces, roller coaster cars. 3D printing is great, but I also want to, venture into, one of, I like to call him a mentor, even though he might not, agree to that, but like Phil Kaiser, he did like working models that were actually made out of metal. He would bend the metal, he would braze or weld the metal. And I thought that was fascinating. And maybe in the future, I'll look into how we can actually make, metal or steel track for models, or maybe even like a backyard coaster. There's always something I want to do along those lines. We'll see, but
Have you seen that
I
video from Metal America that just came out like 2 weeks ago from inside the B&M plant?
absolutely, yep, with the welders. What's funny is I'm actually in a welding program right now because I thought, like, if I'm ever going to make roller coasters, like, you got to know how to weld, and you got to know what that process is, the different processes like MIG, TIG, oxyacetylene, and you know
It's a crazy amount of work, a crazy amount of welding to make one piece of
Oh,
that
I
crap.
know. And then they're like, yeah, we just did, Dr. Diabolical in 4 months. It's nothing. But yeah, no, I actually watched that and I took a lot of notes and I think it's great. But I think the takeaway from that video, and I think this is kind of going into my own little like opinion, what I noticed is Claremont wants to diversify their product portfolio where it sounds like the pandemic hit them pretty hard where not many parks were ordering coasters and now they want to get into other markets to make sure they're profitable, not just from roller coaster, like not have all their eggs in one basket. They want to do roller coasters, they're doing solar, they're doing agriculture, and I think that's why they're being more open where it was very secret. And I think the only secret thing now that they have is how they bend the tubes, which, like in that interview, they said they come from Europe. So that's what I want to look into is, how you can bend tube and whatnot. I think that'd be very fascinating. I was looking into actually making a CNC tube bender, and maybe I'll document it. Maybe I'll show people my project, and maybe it'll be a total failure, maybe a total success. But I want to be more educational. I want to just kind of show stuff. I think it's cool and I get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So that's kind of what the future is. And I know you guys are the same way. You want to be an open book. You want to showcase how people make coasters, and it's not something that's very easy to get into because no one wants to talk about it because that's your bread and butter. You make a roller coaster, so you don't want people to know how you do it. It's a mystery. So it's funny because it's like I feel like coaster companies hate us. We show you the secrets. Um, did you know that most layouts are made in no limits? I just want to, just get people interested, get people excited. If people are talking about it, they want to get interested, they want to know about it. and that will help the community thrive. So that's future.
Can't wait to see your future projects. Earlier, you said you recently visited Universal and Busch Gardens, Tampa. So I got to put you on the spot here. Which do you like better, Velocicoaster or Iron Gwazi?
No, I actually knew this question was going to come. I will. Okay. So I am one of those I like coasters for the sentimental emotional connection, not so much like, oh dude, that one had so much airtime or that one had so much XYZ. So with that said, I am on team Velocicoaster.
Nice.
I like Velocicoaster more. And I rode both rides more than once. And here I'll even add on to your question. Because I said that, the sentimental emotional thing, I like Steel Vengeance more than Iron Gwazi, and I'm going to get a lot of flack for that. But I said it, and here's my defense. And here's my defense. People are going to get mad. Does Iron Gwazi go into its structure for this whole second half? Are you like diving into structure? You're not, but you're still doing the same features. Maybe not as long, but that's my defense. And also, did you make a cool model off Iron Gwazi? No, so it's got to be Steel Vengeance. So you can't get mad at me for that. So there it is. I like Velocicoaster just because it's cool, it's fun. Iron Gwazi is cool. Iron Gwazi is fun. I just like Velocicoaster because it's a little different. There you go. Can I ask you, which one do you like better? Does anyone ask you questions on this interview podcast?
Well, I've only been on Velocicoaster, and I only got it on one time.
There you go. Velocicoaster wins.
So is Steel Vengeance your favorite overall then?
No.
Was it
Do you want to
Millennium
take a
Force
guess or yeah.
for sentimental
Because
reasons?
that was a coaster. It came out. I was like 10, and dude, I rode that, and I was like, this is it. This is what I need to do for the rest of my life. I rode that ride, and it like changed me.
Yeah,
But
I feel like that was the first one I kind of followed along the construction of.
everyone did. Like even people not even interested in roller coasters it was like this is gonna be big, and it lived up to the hype, and the commercial was great, the hype was great, the like you could follow along. I remember going to the Cedar Point website, and they had that crazy gif at the top of their header, and all the little rides were running.
The music in the station.
Yeah, I'm like dating myself, but like everything about that was just perfect. And they try to do that stuff now. It's not the same, or maybe I'm old. I don't know, but that was the ride that was just like, dude, this is what I need to be involved in. And Millennium Force, yeah, it's my favorite for sure. And anytime Cedar Point says we want to do something for Millennium Force, like I have to go over the top for it.
But now you also did the lift hill, right?
Yes, they they wanted to do. Cedar Point asked if we could do something unique. I forgot why, but they just said, "Can you do a lift hill?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And they're like, "Okay, well, just make sure it's not more than 2 feet tall." And I, no joke, went to 2 feet, and I was like, "All right, well, just scale it that way." And that was actually the most fun coaster cutout project. And I actually think that's one of, not the, but one of the better or best products that CoasterDynamix sells, just because it went fast. It like the product sold fast. I mean, not the actual roller coaster that went fast too, but it just, everyone loved it. It was well received, and it looked perfect. And
If you're gonna do a lift hill, it's got to be Millennium Force. It's just so iconic looking. That shape and the
absolutely,
sculpture.
I hope someday we can get a dragster hill to be put right next to it. That was the original plan. But until the ride opens up, we are on holding pattern. But God, if we could do a dragster right next to that thing, I think if it scales, if that's 2 feet, it's going to be like 2.5, 3 feet almost. Like it's going to look really good. But
Pretty
we'll
sweet.
wait for that one.
Any other projects you wanted to talk about?
No, that's really it. I just want to, expand the YouTube, stay in touch with you guys, stay in touch with the community, do more cutouts, do coaster stuff. That's really it. I just want to, hang around the coaster community. So,
Do you want to give some shout outs? Where can people find all of your work and such?
Absolutely. So you can follow me, Print My Ride Detroit on Instagram. You can follow me on YouTube, which, as I said, it's slow, but I'm trying to get more videos there. That's also Print My Ride Detroit. Also, you can follow some of my work at CoasterDynamix. I specifically do the cutouts and some of the nanos. I do not do the working models with them. That's strictly them, but um, that's where you can find me. And as far as shout outs, like, thank you for hosting me. Thanks for being in touch. You guys are great. And I guess I'll just give a shout out to CoasterDynamix. They've been really great. They support my work. They create the work. They manufacture the work. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Thanks for coming on the show, and yeah, we'll have to have another follow up later on once you talk about your next project, whenever that is, or some other time down the future. We'll
Absolutely. Hopefully not by 2027. So let's make sure it's not another 5 years.
All right, so that'll do it for today's show. Thanks again to Matt for joining us, and thank you for listening in. You can connect with the show by emailing us at podcast@coaster101.com or hitting us up on social media. We are at Coaster101 on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode, and please give us a rating and review us wherever you listen because it helps new listeners find us. As always, thanks to JM Music Design for providing our theme song. For more on them, check out jmmusicdesign.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.